My t-shirt says fueled by true crime and tacos, and honestly, that's the vibe I'm going for this entire video. Hey y'all, my name is Nat. I hope you're having a terrific day today, and for this video, we are going to be doing a 5x5 YA mystery style. Before we get into anything bookish though, make sure to hit like and subscribe down below, as well as tell me in the comments what is your favorite YA mystery. If you have not heard, my 5x5 is a series in which I am trying to find 5 5-star reads. I have not succeeded thus far, but I will put a link to the playlist right over here with all of the previous themes. As I said, this time it is going to be a YA mystery style. I have high hopes because mysteries are my favorite genre. As per usual, I'll give you guys a synopsis of each of the 5 books I will be reading. After that, I will have a estimated rating and a 50% update for you guys, followed by a final update and an actual rating. First is The Box in the Woods by Maureen Johnson, and while technically this is the 4th book in the Truly Devious series, reviews I've seen thus far say that you can actually read this as a standalone if you want. This story is following our main character, Stevie Bell. She is a true crime fanatic. After she solved the Truly Devious mystery, she has now been sought after to try and figure out the Box in the Woods murders, which was a case that took place in the 1970s at a summer camp. I'm expecting this is going to have all of those Friday the 13th feels, and I can't wait for it. I'm really excited to get back into this world with these fantastic characters who are also entertaining. Can't wait to pick this up. Next is Monday's Not Coming by Tiffany D. Jackson. I've heard amazing things about this, and I really want to try out more of Tiffany D. Jackson's work. This story is following our main character who has just gone to high school, but on her first day, her best friend Monday doesn't show. She ends up not being able to find Monday, and after talking to some of the other adults in her life, no one is really concerned other than our main character, so she takes it upon herself to try and find her. I've heard this is pretty hardcore, but I'm really excited for it. After that is Jane Anonymous by Lori Ferreira-Stolaris. I haven't heard about this book from anyone, so I have pretty much no expectations going in. This story is following our main character Jane, who was held hostage for 6 months, but has recently been saved and her kidnapper caught. However, Jane ends up going to the police and asks about the little boy who was held captive alongside her, and no one knows about him, so Jane takes it upon herself to try and find him. Next up is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. This is a first in a series in which our main character Pip is taking on a mystery for her senior capstone project. I believe it is some kind of a murder that took place in her town. However, the suspect has already been taken into custody, but Pip doesn't believe he's guilty. I've heard amazing things about this. I've been pretty apprehensive to pick it up just because I've heard so many great things, but the 3rd book just recently came out, so I figure this is the perfect time to start. And then finally, The Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline Booley. I believe the story is following a half Native American girl who has never felt at home in her tribe, but ends up getting pulled into this mystery by some FBI agents to be used as an informant, and tries to start to solve the mystery herself. I don't really know a ton about this, and I've heard that's the best way to go in. She is a bit chunky, but I'm really excited to try this one out. Alright y'all, so that is it. I will talk to you again when I have a 50% update for the first book. Hey y'all, I have hit the halfway point into The Box in the Woods by Maureen Johnson, and I'm loving this. Not really surprised at all. I was very excited to get back in with these characters. I loved everybody in the Truly Devious series, or the Truly Devious trilogy. In particularly, Nate is probably my favorite. It's very dry and has a super sarcastic sense of humor, begging for Friday the 13th references, and Nate is not disappointing. When I first read the initial trilogy, I wasn't on BookTube. I didn't think terribly critically about what I was reading. I just had a great time. However, in this one, already something I've picked up on that I am sure also took place in the trilogy was the amount of detail that is given around settings, also the actions of side characters, because we're seeing from Stevie's perspective and we know she is supposed to be the detective, so it makes sense that she picks up on all these little things surrounding her and tries to remember them for the future. It also doubles as an opportunity for Johnson to showcase us little details that we might not realize are important until the ending reveal. It just makes perfect sense with the fact that Stevie is a true crime fan. She is very cautious. She is aware of putting herself in certain situations. She definitely looks out for patterns and clues to pick up on. I also like that we're not just told she is a true crime fan. We also see it in her actions and also in the media she consumes. One of my favorite moments was she actually uses a psychology trick that she learned while researching Charles Manson. Something else I really appreciate in this one is we have a map. And may I just say, I think more mysteries really need to consider putting maps in their books. It makes it so much easier to follow the characters and to actually visualize the setting they're in and maybe make connections yourself to try and work on solving it. While the crime scene itself is not actually visible here, you can see where one of the bodies was found, and there's a little arrow pointing towards the crime scene itself. and The Box in the Woods. This one is also following the same layout that the previous trilogy did, which is that there are alternating timelines between the current time where Stevie is attempting to solve the case and in the past verse where we actually see the crime happen and then watch the town reacting to said crime. In the past timeline, we are alternating between different people's perspectives, so we are getting the chance to see how different people view the crime and some different possibilities of who is responsible for it. There are plenty of callbacks to Truly Devious, but with that, there's often a little summary of whatever events they're referencing, so you don't feel terribly lost. I think the only thing you would really miss out on is possibly some character relationships and dynamics to further explain why they are this way. One thing I really appreciated in this, and I like that Johnson actually referenced it, is the fact that this case only took place in the 70s, while the other one took place in the 30s. In the 30s, it was a lot easier for Stevie to detach from it and not see the victims as real individuals because she wasn't interacting with not the victims, but say like their families or the people who were directly impacted by this crime. This one, she is. Feel is just a lot eerier because there's less separation there. Okay, so actually estimating a rating. I am really enjoying this. I think for the time being, I'm going to put my estimated rating at 4 stars. I think that's a nice solid number, so I could love it more. Hopefully I won't be any more disappointed. Hey y'all, so newsflash, I have officially finished out The Box in the Woods by Maureen Johnson, and unsurprisingly, I loved it. I just had such a great time being back with these characters. Once again, I have to praise the amount of Nate content we got. I think we actually get to see some growth from him in this one also, and I really adore that. He is just so hilarious. He actually acted as more of a Watson character this time around and helped Stevie in a certain situation trying to solve the case. Something that I did want to further discuss, I mentioned in my previous update that there are some callbacks to Truly Devious and the crime that took place in those 3 books, but overall it's not very spoilery. You actually could probably read this book to see if you enjoy Maureen Johnson's writing and her mystery style, and then if you like it, you may enjoy going back to the Truly Devious series. We do see the entire crime solved in this one book, whereas in Truly Devious, it spans all 3 books. Speaking of solving the mystery in this one, the ending was just, it made the book so unputdownable. I could not stop reading. I was just guzzling it down. That was a weird term to use there. I'm going with it. The twist and the reveal, just fantastic. I was very impressed. Along with that, I really love that Maureen Johnson leans into the fact that this is a mystery series and kind of leans on that campiness. Stevie actually has one of those moments where she calls together everybody who is a part of the case and reveals everything. I love those moments in murder mysteries, and I really appreciate that Johnson does it in her books. The concluding reveal was just so well done, and I really enjoyed it. I think it also showcases how Stevie has matured as an investigator because we get to see she is using new tricks that she's learned from her further research into true crime that she didn't really do in the previous books. It's showcasing that maturity and that development as a character, and I really love that. I really love in YA mysteries, I feel as though the characters get a lot more attention than they often do in adult mysteries. I don't know if I'm the only one who thinks that, but if you agree, let me know. In the end, for my rating, I tried to be fairly unbiased and not let my love of the entire series cloud my judgment for this rating. I think I did a good enough job because this has been getting a ton of praise from everyone who's read it so far, and I'm gonna go right along with them. I gave this baby 5 stars. It was a fun time. I really recommend this. There's a specific scene in this that really just gets your heart going and makes your blood pump, and I love it. Hey y'all, so I've officially hit the halfway point into Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline Boulley, and I will say right now that this is going to be a very hard book to discuss because this evolves so much from what is given in the synopsis, and pretty much anything I want to talk about right now seems a little spoilery, but I don't want to ruin this book for anyone. I do recommend it thus far, and I am really enjoying it, but please understand I might be a little vague in this halfway update. Right out of the gate, I want to let you know that the first 100 pages of this book are very slow-paced. We are focusing focusing on Donis and understanding her identity, her relationships, and the setting she is in. Donis is half white and half Ojibwe, so we get to see a little bit of code switching from her depending on which side of her family she is interacting with, but we also get to see her place within the community and how she is handling her religion and how she connects with her traditions and just stays true to her roots. I've really enjoyed the writing thus far, particularly of Donis's thought processes. She has a very analytical mind and really enjoys science. With that, anytime she learns or experiences something new, she tries to relate it back to something scientific that she already knows about, and I think that's a really interesting way of showing a character's thoughts. However, unfortunately, she's a little bit not like other girls. She's pretty athletic, she is very academic focused, and tends to hate on pretty much every female character who is around her and near her age. I really enjoy how this story has unfolded to teach us, the readers, of the Ojibwe life, talking about the culture, the politics, the struggles, and the beauty within it. There's also a fair amount of Ojibwa language utilized within the book. Sometimes it is translated for us, sometimes it's not, and we're giving context clues. All in all, I don't think it's a hindrance to the story. I think it better adds to the atmosphere of where this story is supposed to be taking place. After all of that initial setup, once the mystery officially starts, I was very shocked at how it was introduced. That being said, it automatically hooked me in. 𝗖cie is focusing on real issues that actually affect Indigenous people, and I think that is very smart and makes the stakes of the story feel all the higher. However, for being halfway into the book, I feel like the mystery hasn't actually progressed all that much thus far. One thing that is kind of a negative, but also sort of a positive, I suppose, is there is a lot of characters in this book, and all in all, I don't think enough of them have depth, but I do think it is highlighting how familial based the tribe is. Not just the tribe, but this entire community is. Not even just familial, all of the connections they have, whether they are related to them or not. There's certain characters that I'm very intrigued by, but I really wish they had more depth to them and I could better know them the same way Donis does, and maybe then I would feel more invested in the relationship she has with them. That being said, Donis has a half-brother, Levi, and I am very invested in their relationship. I really appreciate the way it has been handled so far. They don't ever really identify each other as their half-siblings, and they certainly don't act like it. As someone who has 3 half-siblings myself, I really appreciated seeing this represented in the story. I still have 200 pages, so obviously there is still plenty of time for the mystery to progress, but I do wish we would have learned more by this point. I am really intrigued by this book, and I'm having a great time learning about the culture so far. Since I went into this expecting a YA mystery, I really would have preferred more from it. I think for the time being, I'm gonna go with 3.5 stars. Hey y'all, so I officially finished Firekeeper's Daughter by 𝗖cie, and the end of this book was a emotional roller coaster. I will admit upfront that unfortunately around the 75% mark I did kind of start skimming, just because it felt like it was taking a very long time for us to learn anything substantial in terms of the investigation. The investigation plotline still remained very slow paced. However, there were some side plots that started going on, which I do think helped to increase the pace overall up to more of a medium standard. I just wasn't really interested in those side plots apart from the romantic element. I was very invested in that element. It took a very long time for us to learn anything in the investigation, and even when we would learn something, that information will be repeated ad nauseum. Coupled with that is the fact that the reveal of who is involved in this case, one person in particular I was very shocked by, but apart from that, pretty much everyone else I kind of guessed, which made for a unsatisfying answer. The actual end of the book, however, is very brutal. I think 𝗖cie brought up a lot of serious topics that still plague Indigenous people today, unfortunately. Some serious injustices that just still are happening. It made for a very bleak ending, but at the same time, I think it was very realistic, unfortunately. Because of all of that, the ending is very cry-worthy. However, I do think there is a little glimmer of hope for our main character, Donis, moving forward, and I appreciated that. I think my estimated rating was a bit incorrect, and unfortunately, the actual rating is going to be 3.5 stars. I think in terms of the atmosphere and the characterization of Donis, this book was really well done, and then how 𝗖cie handled and commentated on real-world issues within this book was just fantastic. But as a mystery, it was kind of a letdown, unfortunately, so I went with 3.5 stars. Hey y'all! So I've officially hit the halfway point into Monday's Not Coming by Tiffany D. Jackson. Right out of the gate, I have to say this has a very strange layout in terms of a timeline. There are alternating points of view in terms of the before, the after. Sometimes there will be 2 weeks before the before or a week after the after, and it's very confusing to keep straight when certain things are happening. Maybe it would be a little easier if I was physically reading this as opposed to listening to the audiobook, but I don't think so. On top of that, another thing that I am having a hard time with is our main character, Claudia, who is trying to find her best friend Monday, has multiple adults in her life that she does have a healthy relationship with, and I'm very frustrated by the fact that she's not being completely honest in how uncomfortable she feels with not seeing Monday for this long. Claudia is keeping a lot of it to herself, and then the adults continuously keep making excuses for the situations. I understand naivety in Claudia because she's a 13-year-old. She's had a fairly good life. She's pretty sheltered. I get why she wouldn't automatically jump to certain conclusions, but this many adults are aware that something hinky's going on and they're not thinking about it? Are you kidding me? Sorry, the angle might have just changed a little bit. I got a phone call. But I realize that my issue with this is just having a hard time suspending my disbelief, because that's basically the main plot, is that none of the adults in her life are really concerned about Monday's disappearance. But I'm just having a hard time doing it, even though this is a YA mystery and usually with those comes some suspension of disbelief. Apart from that, however, I am enjoying the story. I really like being in Claudia's mindset. She's very artistic and is actually pretty smart, but it doesn't always get acknowledged. She's able to name different colors just from looking at them. She associates people with colors, and I just really appreciate the artistic mindset we are seeing from this young girl. Very similar to Donis with the scientific mindset in Firekeeper's Daughter. Claudia and Monday are pretty similar, but also pretty different, and I really enjoy watching their friendship. It is very adorable. It definitely gives me some nostalgia to my best friend when I was this age. As an adult reading this book, I think there are plenty of clues that are pointing us in the direction of what certainly happened to Monday. I think there's definitely a lot of foreshadowing in that. But being in Claudia's perspective, a 13-year-old who, as I mentioned, is pretty naive and innocent, she just doesn't even think of these little things and twist them into the dark scenario of reality. I am certain we are going to see her loss of innocence once she finally figures out what happened to Monday. So for the time being, I think my estimated rating is going to be a 4 stars, because although there were those 2 things I mentioned at the beginning that I wasn't a big fan of, overall I've been really impressed with how the story has been developing. I don't think it's terribly shocking. I really am curious to see, once the final reveal happens, if it does surprise me or not. I'm also curious on whether this book was influenced by the numerous disappearances of young Black girls in the DC area in, I think it was 2017. Hey y'all, so I've officially finished Monday's Not Coming by Tiffany D. Jackson, and this was a rough read. The implications that I mentioned in the first half of the book are definitely plenty of warning, but that doesn't make the final reveal any less of a punch in the gut. In fact, I would actually argue, because of all of the clues that are laid out, the story doesn't really read like a mystery, because it's quite obvious to the reader what happened, but you're trying to watch Claudia figure out what took place. Monday and Claudia's friendship was just so sweet, and I really loved how Tiffany D. Jackson built these dynamic characters who had just a wonderful bond and were able to stay friends even in the face of so much adversity in their lives. Unfortunately, the funky layout that I mentioned at my first update, with the before and after, and the whole aspect of that being out of chronological order, definitely became a hindrance as the story progressed. At times the stakes would feel insanely high, but then we would alternate to a different time period and the urgency would just drop, which made for really odd pacing, and the middle of the story felt like there were a lot of lulls where nothing was really happening or being found out. It also led to some confusion for me in the end when there is a final plot twist that takes place, because I had to sit there and work through everything that was happening and figure out what timeline was this happening. So in that case, then what timeline is this happening? happening, and I had to figure out how all of these work together to give us this final answer. I think a simpler layout in which it was just broken down in the before and the after, and those were both told in a chronological order, would have definitely helped the story in terms of pacing and to actually make this feel like a mystery plot line. Along with the layout, as I mentioned, there is a final twist, and it was weird. I didn't really understand any of the other characters' motivations when doing what they did to lead to this event. I'm trying really hard not to be spoilery, but it's very difficult. Even though I was definitely struggling, I became addicted to the story in that last 15% because I had to figure out what was going on. In the end, I do think my estimated rating was correct, and I'm gonna go with 4 stars on this one. This is definitely a hard-hitting and important mystery story with a heart-wrenching ending, and it's definitely untraditional to most YA mysteries, which makes it stand out. Hey y'all, so I've officially hit the halfway point into A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, and I have not planned out anything I want to say. I am so addicted to this book. I'm doing this update so I can continue reading. No thoughts, brain empty. This mystery is fantastically done. I am so enthralled. Every time a new piece of evidence is unveiled, I'm automatically like, oh, okay, that means this person did it, and that connects to this, and that connects to this. And I think the multimedia aspect that is done within this story really allows for you to try and solve the mystery alongside Pip. I am listening to the audiobook as well as physically reading it, and I think that really helps, especially given that the audiobook has a full cast of characters, so it's just all the more immersive. Finally, one thing with the multimedia aspect I've really been loving, and I think helps to keep me engaged and watching all of these different characters, is that at the end of each of Pip's updates, she lists out a suspect list. Very smart on Holly Jackson's part, because there are so many different avenues that this story has taken thus far that are developing the mystery into so much more than what we were initially told from when the cops investigated in the past. I do really enjoy Pip's character. She seems to be the most well fleshed out thus far, but I just love her characterization. She's definitely like a Veronica Mars or a Nancy Drew. I don't think she's quite as scary or off-putting as Veronica could be, and she's a bit more impulsive than Nancy. However, I love her tenacity. She's definitely an overachiever, and that does not just extend to her mystery skills, also to her personal life as well. There's a bit of a romance developing, I can tell, and for the time being, I'm not incredibly invested in it just because I don't think that character has been developed enough for me to really ship them, but I do have faith that Holly Jackson is going to improve it because thus far I do enjoy the dynamic between the two and I can see the sparks of something. Speaking of characters, there is some great casual diversity and many of the other side characters and the major players within the story. One of the topics that Pip actually mentions when discussing the original investigation is how the media portrayed Salil, who is Indian, and the racist tone that was often taken around him. Finally, one thing that I don't know why I love this so much, but anytime in a mystery where there is a threat to our investigator telling them to stop digging, I just automatically become all the more interested in figuring out who did it. And we have not one, but 2 of those so far. All right, so I think that is all of the thoughts that I can spew at you from the top of my head. My estimated rating, I'm loving this, but we know never give a 5-star estimate, so we're going with 4 stars for now. I might have found a new fave mystery series though. I can't imagine that the end of this book is going to be disappointing, so I already am planning to try and find the second book. Hey y'all, so I finished A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson, and I'm really happy to say that this one ended up living up to all of the hype I've heard. The very base plot of this is pretty similar to Truly Devious, but I didn't mind because I just love reading about those kinds of stories in which a young teenage girl ends up turning her obsession of crime into a passion for actually solving it. Pip was a very likable protagonist, although she sometimes would make decisions that I didn't always agree with and wanted to shake her for, but I still loved following her. The romantic element in the end did still feel a bit underdeveloped, but it was very adorable and I was very happy it didn't detract from the main mystery. And what a mystery it was! This had a very complex
complex plot with so many different avenues and countless connections, because this is all taking place in a small town. I was just constantly hooked. The amount of threats that Pip receives had me so hungry to actually get an answer. There was a specific surprising twist that took place that really caught me off guard. I just didn't really think that Holly Jackson was gonna go there, but she went there, and part of me hated her for it and part of me admires her for it. The ending was filled with many surprises and it was very difficult to put this book down. I had about 20 pages left when I had to go to bed last night. It was really hard to stop, really hard. Unfortunately, I did have a few little negatives. One is there's a aspect of drama between Pip and Ravi, who is the younger brother of Sal, who was accused of the murder. It just felt a bit unnecessary because it ended up getting resolved a chapter later, and I think we could have just done without it. Also, I found out that the setting of this book actually differs depending on whether you are reading a US edition or a UK edition. Holly Jackson is from the UK and the story was originally set there, but if you read the US edition, it is set in Connecticut. For the most part, I didn't really pick up on this. However, towards the end of the book, there was occasional usage of certain words that just definitely were glaringly British and did sort of take me out of the story, where I just couldn't help but think Americans don't say that. All in all though, this was really enjoyable. I had such a fun time reading it. It was entertaining and addictive. I definitely am going to be picking up the second one. I don't know when it's going to happen, but I can guarantee you it will be happening. In the end, because I did have just a few things that weren't great, I did give this a 4.5 stars, but if I'm being completely honest, let's just round that baby up to a 5 stars for this 5 by 5. That means I am at 2 5 stars. Oh yeah.
Hey y'all, so I've officially hit the halfway point into Jane Anonymous by Laeuferlied 𝗖cie, and this has an interesting layout as well. It alternates back and forth between a now and then timeline. Now is after Jane has been rescued from her kidnapper, while the then timeline starts on the day that Jane is kidnapped and then progresses forward through the 7 months she was held hostage. The story also starts with Jane introducing the book as though it is her memoir, and she refers to herself as Jane Anonymous throughout it, which I think right out of the gate just makes it feel so much more personal, because it seems as though we are reading a nonfiction story. Thus far, Jane is a very well-developed character. She is so angry at having been subjected to what she was, and she really does want to progress forward in her life, but she doesn't know how to. She doesn't understand how to express her emotions to anyone in her life. Her family, her friends, her boyfriend. The only thing she really wants to do is write about it, but her mother is not supportive in this and really is trying to push Jane to see a therapist, but Jane just is so untrustworthy of other people. She is constantly paranoid about everything with understandable reasoning. Although she's been free for a while, she still runs her life as though she is trapped. She utilizes the same system that her kidnapper did to reward herself for positive behaviors. She's clearly suffering from PTSD, and as I said, she's incredibly paranoid, which becomes very infectious as you continue reading her story. That was all to do with the now chapters. As for the then chapters, I really enjoy the fact that although Jane is a victim, she doesn't think of herself that way, and she is really trying to constantly plot and figure out her surroundings and how to utilize them to her benefit. She is constantly taking note of things and trying to figure out how she can use it to escape or to possibly bargain for her freedom. But at the same time, we're really seeing how being held captive can affect someone, from not experiencing actual sunlight to being starved for a connection or physical affection to being actually starved. I will say this definitely gets very heavy pretty quickly, and it does look at some pretty hardcore topics. So if you have any triggers, I would consider looking at content warnings. The one thing in this story so far that I just think is allowing us to get into Jane's mind and really makes the rest of the story feel so infectious is because the author really highlights Jane's senses in all of these different scenarios, where she's being held captive to when she is spiraling into a panic attack. The author highlights what she's smelling, what she can see and focus on, what she's feeling, and then even so, she might focus on it to the point that she accidentally starts to do something without even realizing it. Say it's scraping off her fingernail polish, or pulling a bunch of tissues out of a box, shaking a salt shaker until it's empty. This is something I've just never seen utilized in a mystery before, and again, it just really allows me to be immersed in Jane's head and understand how she is feeling. Thus far, This is probably the most disturbing book I've read for this video because we are experiencing all of these terrifying things along with Jane. Although there definitely were some harder topics hit in some of the other books, for this one, I think it's just the most terrifying because again, we're experiencing these travesties along with the character. Thus far, I'm estimating my rating to be a 4-star because I am really enjoying it. It's a very fast read and the chapters are pretty short. I can't decide whether I like the now perspective more or the then perspective more because we're just seeing two very different sides of Jane. She is the same person, but she has gone through something so terrible that it's changed her so much. Hey y'all, so I've officially finished out Jane Anonymous by Laeuferlied and this is awkward. This book actually kind of does the same thing in the plot twist that Behind the Red Door by Megan Collins did, which I just read last month. Meaning the twist that took place I was expecting, so it wasn't very surprising to me. I would say that's really odd because I considered that a pretty unusual twist to utilize and turn this story into like a psychological thriller. Didn't expect to read 2 books with it 2 months back to back. That's not to say that this was a bad book, however. I still very much enjoyed this story and watching Jane try to recover from what happened to her, as well as piece together her memories to come to a more succinct conclusion of the events that transpired while she was being held. In the beginning of the book, I didn't actually expect an unreliable narrator. Even with the summary, I kind of just expected that Jane would be the one who really knew what was taking place. But as the story progresses, we learn that Jane actually does have some gaps in her memory from when she was being held. And then the twist that took place with that, well, once again, I do think is unusual. Since I literally just read another book that had said twist, I wasn't very surprised. In the second half of the book, it's really focusing on Jane's PTSD, her handling of her trauma, and the resistance she has against the healing process. I was so captivated by that aspect though, because I had grown to care about Jane so much throughout the story, and it's just very easy to empathize with her. And I just was really hoping that she was finally going to start taking those steps necessary to heal. Out of the 5 I read for this video, this book is definitely up there competing for the most terrifying because the ending answer is just so realistically horrific and we're experiencing it along with the character. That did make this for a very fast read. I blasted through this book. I read the entire first half in one day and the entire second half in one night and one morning. Definitely would recommend this book because it does stand out apart from other YA mysteries. This was just an unfortunate timing for when I read it. In the end, after doing my call pile, I did still give this book 4 stars. Still a 4-star read, still recommend it. All right, y'all, so that is it. Thank you so much for coming to my channel today. I really appreciate it. Make sure to hit like and subscribe down below. My Goodreads, Storygraph, and Instagram are all in the description if you're interested in keeping up with what I am reading. I come out with videos on Monday and Friday, but until then, I hope you continue to have a terrific day. Love you, bye!